Good evening. This is the East Aurora Union Free School District Special Board of Education meeting for Wednesday, July 20th, 2022. Please join me in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going right into reports and discussion items. Our update on discussion on the proposed capital facilities project.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's great to be back. I'm going to present from this side today so that I can actually point to the screen instead of attempting to explain what I was talking about over there last time.
Just keep going, I'm just relocating.
So just a quick agenda tonight. I think we had a really productive conversation last week, at least from a presentation standpoint. Since then, we've sat down and met with the district administration again, as well as a couple of the board members, gotten some feedback on some of the pieces and parts of the project, especially the site work for high school. That's really what we're going to focus on, what I'm going to focus on here. And then obviously any questions at any point, stop me. I'll run through the scope review and then another update on the budget of the project based off of those adjustments and changes. Not going to cooperate. All right. So, 3 or 4 pretty big changes on the overall plan. I'll break them down as we go one by one here. So from the conversations last time, we were looking at about a 1.3% tax impact to accomplish an 8 tennis court with lights, turf field combination with regrading and removing the existing tennis courts. Several items of note that came up from that. One, impact to cross country. Brian Lombardo was very vocal about the location of the tennis courts in the previous iteration, the new tennis courts being in the way of the start finish of the cross country courts. The need for 6 to 8 courts. There was a wonderful suggestion by Dan to potentially keep some of the existing tennis courts that are in place, to salvage them and reuse them, so to maintain an 8-court setup without the cost of 8 brand new courts. And then the turf field itself, making it as productive and functional as possible by incorporating soccer into the field as well. So first off, the tennis courts in their new configuration here, directly adjacent to the football field and track, are in a direct north-south orientation. They are moved away from B, which is the cross-country start area. There will be 6 courts with lights in the configuration right now. B, as I mentioned, the cross-country start area. C, taking the 2 most recently installed courts and leaving them in place. Basically cutting the pavement and removing the rest of it, putting a new fence up around the courts, leaving those courts there, and then potentially adding a rebound wall directly to the west of the courts. That's sort of a big concrete or solid barricade for soccer, lacrosse practice, just allowing the students and the athletes to use that to kick against or to throw a ball against.
Steve, where would that wall be?
Right now, we're showing it directly to the west of the tennis courts here, but it doesn't have to be there. It could be shifted in different areas around the site, even by the new tennis courts if we wanted it, but just a wall in that location, so you'd have this whole area of field area next to it for people to line up in.
So the wall would kind of be at where the top of the C is.
Yeah, where the top of the C is, correct.
Steve, I'm sorry. I thought the current courts are north-south. They're obviously not.
They're
that-
not directly north-south,
Okay,
no.
so,
It's close. North-south, center actually is north-south,
okay.
so they're a little bit off
They're
from
a
the
little bit
north-south
So
orientation.
they'll just stay the way they're oriented now,
Yeah.
and just be repaired. Because I know those 2 at that end were, at least one of them was in really bad shape,
Yes.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so which ones we picked to keep, we have, this is still diagrammatic, understanding that the cost to repair those would not be economical. You're better off just building new ones at that point. The scope here, the intention would be to literally leave them in their existing condition. And that's how they would stay. They would not be resurfaced. They would not be rebuilt.
at all,
At
so they
all.
would just
They
stay the
would
way
stay.
they are.
Yeah, so we'd have to
Okay.
pick the 2 courts that are in the best condition, evaluate, to make sure that they have at least some 5 to 10-year lifespan out of them, and then just put the fences back up around.
What, wouldn't that though, has the tennis coach looked at that? Like my thought is if you're the tennis coach and you're having a tennis match and you've got 6 here and 2 there, how is the tennis coach gonna be able to go back and forth?
It's an extra bonus of use. You really can't afford the 8, so it's sacrificing, your 6 is your main use facility.
Okay.
The 2 are our bonus, that you could have a match going on and the community could still be using the other 2.
Three singles, doubles.
Right, okay,
Is a
right.
match. The other ones are just overflow.
They're like
Yeah.
exhibition matches,
Right,
like
exactly.
exhibition matches.
Extra
going on, and
practice,
You
exhibition.
want to have an extra coach or volunteer that people to.
And keep in mind, these wouldn't have lights, whereas these would. So if you've got a match or something going into the evening, you really wouldn't be able to use the 2 existing courts anyway.
And just, I'm sorry,
Even
just
for public use, public use too. Yeah, space, and kids are playing.
the new courts, is it gonna have that stadium, the seating in the middle that they talked about, or is it just gonna be like a pathway, like will there be a way
There
to
could be,
watch? Okay,
it's, right now, we're just accounting for the location of it,
okay,
with it, how wide the concrete is directly to allow for seating, bleachers. We are showing a passageway between the 2, similar to the Lancaster High School setup that has that crossover, so that athletes and coaches can access one court at a time instead of having to cross between or, cross the field to play. But that center area could get a little wider to allow for seating in the middle if that were desired. Because of the movement of the tennis courts this way, the existing discus would have to be relocated. It is currently situated right in the center area, so it would have to be relocated to the southern side of the site or another location on the site. Once again, not necessarily a final location. It makes sense here for the long-term plan, but we could find a different spot for it if there's a better spot from the coach's perspective.
And is all of that, with drainage would be taken care of for all of that? Because like right now where the discus is, where it was swamp this spring.
Anything that's being done here, so A and D, these 2 areas in particular, would have completely new drainage underneath them. So there'd be we get some residual repairs and correctiveness for the surrounding areas because of that. But it wouldn't, and obviously then E would have to be drained appropriately as well to make sure that's not a swamp in the new location.
Does leaving the 2 tennis courts at C preclude any drainage work that would make that a more usable space?
Yes.
So it's just kind of swampy field,
Tennis court.
grungy courts.
Right.
Okay. The earlier plan, what did what was in the earlier?
The earlier plan here, there was nothing here. It was just a leveled and graded grass area.
Practice.
So
Okay.
practice space,
So-
gym, athletic space, just lawn area.
So this is 2/3 lawn area, so the work is still done to take away some of the courts. Okay.
And obviously, as you said, it depends, you're gonna go look, because just the 1 and 2 courts at this far end are
Better.
in good shape
Yeah, it's-
compared to the other ones, so it would be fine to do it at that end, even though you have the trees and stuff.
The
and then-
downside there is you'd have the tree issue with the maintenance.
Right.
So you'd have to weigh the
Right.
positives and negatives of which court's longevity, condition of the actual court itself versus the lead issue. But if your main competition courts and where you're gonna use it most are here, is it as much of a pressing issue if there are leads on those courts at some point?
That could be a great spot for batting cages. See,
We don't have any.
So is this,
Yeah,
is this definitive, like, this is what you're recommending?
This is, well, based off of the conversations yesterday, we didn't talk about that.
No, I meant moving,
Yes.
keeping 2 tennis courts, that's what you're,
In a sense, what we're trying to do is establish what the scope is.
you're right.
So it doesn't matter where we leave the tennis courts, but we're leaving 2 tennis courts and
Okay.
building 6 new ones.
Right.
This is still open as part of the design. We work with
Yeah.
the school district to get those things resolved.
So I'll jump out of order here to I think maybe answer a bigger picture question here. The target is 1% or less. So there are a ton of uncertainties with any of these scope items, especially as we're moving and changing things around. I'm going to transition to the turf area as well. And this is how you'll see, hopefully see how the two are related. When this was presented last week, this turf area was for field hockey and lacrosse. It was not large enough for a full-size soccer field. Through the conversations over the last week, it became apparent that making this area large enough to fit a soccer field as well would be beneficial for the district in the long run. If you remember the long-term plan with the soccer field and the two baseball and softball field up here, it's actually that slide. This is 8 to 10 years off. Realistically speaking, to allow the incidental MCA to reset, it's a future project that's down the road. That's not even a guarantee. So to benefit the district in the short term, what's the possibility of making this larger? So we've been pulling numbers and scrambling to try to come up with answers here, but there's probably going to have to be some give or take. The original plan was a smaller field with lights. Soccer field is bigger. To make it a soccer field, lights for this may have to go away. Either way, the target, one or the other, is what's the 1%. We can include the word up to that 1% marker, and as long as we're not exceeding that, then I think we're targeting and hitting a goal and a marker that seemed to be what everyone was comfortable with at that point. So while this is the plan we're proposing and recommending to move forward with, because we believe based off of everything we've heard, it hits on hopefully 99% of the major points and the major concerns for this area and setting up the long-term plan. Various parts and pieces of it have a little bit of wiggle room that they may need to be adjusted, like the location of the two courts that are salvaged, or the location of that rebound wall where it goes. How wide or the type of passageway or crossway in here, lights, no lights, how large that field actually can get to accommodate a regulation size soccer field. So that's the change from last week here. It would stay in the same location, but the field would actually grow by about 20% to accommodate the soccer field. And just a few hours ago, in talking with Brian, not this Brian, other Brian, the intention would be to have the soccer field here match the soccer field size on the football field, so that the two are sort of a 1A, 1B field that you could use them interchangeably, and there's no priority or hierarchy between the two, so no one feels, oh, we're relegated to playing on the smaller field today. So for equity and long-term plan, that was sort of the goal there, and how we're moving forward, or proposing to move forward with that. And then obviously, just to come full circle, none of these movements or changes impact the potential of doing this down the road.
So down the road, we have 3 soccer fields, am I reading this?
Potentially, the outfield here is large enough for a soccer. This plan isn't locked in place, right? So this concept was thought out before this becomes a soccer field. Does this become more economical if we make this smaller and just make it a baseball and a softball diamond without a soccer field here? Maybe it lowers the cost of that and makes that more feasible for the district down the road, because this is a ballpark $10 million concept.
No pun intended.
No, yes. Actually, pun intended. I didn't think about it, but we'll go with that. But this is a very expensive proposition, and if you remember, the incidental cap at the school is just over $5 million. So half of that money would have to be local share to pay for it. So if we can cut a little bit off with that by building a soccer field here, maybe that does help us down the road and allows things to be more flexible, both in short term and long term. We can always go back to that if we need to. So another item that came up in discussion was looking through the scope of the project. Was there anything in the rest of those scope documents and sheets that may not have been super advantageous to pursue at this time? And there was one item that did come up at all 3 buildings, and that was flagpole replacement. So to give you a little bit more understanding of what that means, air conditioning systems run on, and heating systems and cooling systems, they run on liquid that's passed down the pipes. And very often those are done with water. Well, the problem with water is that can freeze in the winter. So you have to drain lines on air conditioning systems at the end of the year. It can be labor intensive. Changing the systems over to glycol is a freeze-resistant liquid in the system that would allow for the system to be kept operational year-round and not have that maintenance. But there's inherent costs associated with the swap out. It's not just as simple as draining the liquid and putting new liquid in. There's different mechanical components. It wasn't a huge expense in the overall project, but Doug brought up the concern that while this is an ongoing maintenance item, there are pieces of equipment in the district that are older and some that are newer as well. We're swapping out this system to a glycol system on equipment that might only have 5 more years lifespan. That could be wasted money down the road. Likewise, equipment that's new from a project 3 or 4 years ago, we might be taking out components that were just recently installed. So is it better to put a hold on that, use that money in a more advantageous way? So in total, that was about $500,000 of the complete project budget. And the rest of the scope then doesn't change, it stays the same. We still have clock systems, mechanical work, and security cameras at Parkdale. All the same work at the middle school that we presented previously, the library, the hallways, the family and consumer sciences room, tennis courts, parking lots, and some other HVAC improvements at the high school. But what that gets us in total is a little bit of a buffer. So that $500,000 could be used for the site changes, whether it's the tennis courts, whether it's maintaining, getting a soccer field, as well as lights for the turf, or it could be used to deal with volatility in the bidding market right now, which is extremely uncertain. You also remember we had several recommended items that could be kept for alternates down the road. So these were the items that we would think about if money were left over. We go through a phase 1 and get very good bid results. Where can we allocate an extra $500,000 if we save money somewhere? Pool bleachers, the middle school shop room. I added the turf lighting onto this list as well as something that could be on that bubble. So between that $500,000 contingency, we'll call it, to cover the volatility in the market and these additional items, it gives us some flexibility down the road to potentially do more work when we get through the main items of the project that have been prioritized. So I've already been talking about the budget here, but this is, in summary, kind of the gist of it. Parkdale's budget, all 3 buildings' budgets dropped slightly due to that glycol removal, glycol replacement removal. Gives us a total project budget of around up to $22.3 million. And I say up to 22.3 because it all has to do with that tax impact. The important part there is we would not accept any projects, any bid work that would exceed the 1% tax impact from a total financial package. So in summary again, since the last meeting, we've changed the high school scope of work, we removed the glycol. We really want to target that 1%. The contingency covers the volatility. The plan is still to use the $13.6 million of the existing capital reserve and use all of that and then leverage the additional 1% tax impact to get the total budget and accomplish all of these parts and pieces. Any questions?
I do have one comment. There was a question about whether or not we could use some of the MCA at the middle school. And I think it was you who pointed out that Lockport did that where there was a baseball fields that weren't attached to their high school that they got aid on. So I talked to the business official about that. It might not be the way we want to go. They were turned down by SED twice when they requested this. They went around SED. They got the legislature to go over, and they have had nothing but problems with SED since then. But they did get the aid for those two baseball and a softball field, but it was not something she would recommend doing. And they right now do not have leadership that's willing to, take a stand like that. Carl Thurno, when he was there, did it for a project we had to the table where we wrote a letter to say the stadium, which wasn't near the high school, could get aid because that's where the high school played. So the idea of trying to use some of the middle school MCA at the high school will be turned down multiple times.
We did that in our last project.
I thought, yeah, large project, there was some that we moved over to the high school. I don't remember what areas.
But that was back in those days.
Right, like you could call up a reasonable person and have a conversation. And potentially get it. But at this point in time, the answer was twice no. You know, really rattled SED stage. Something to think about.
Then somebody else tried that.
Yes.
So this plan just is as is, there's no alternate, like there's no two parts to this.
No, this would be there's no 1 and 1.3. There seems to be a lot of hesitation there. There was obvious concerns about a second proposition, the negatives and potential pitfalls, locking yourself into a 0.3 amount that can only be spent on one thing. After it really getting to 1% started when we said, well, what happens if we take 2 tennis courts in my top? And it got really close. It was 1.02%. It's like, okay, well, how can we then, what can we shuffle to get us to 1% confidently? And then the meeting yesterday and the conversations about the soccer field size and being able to adjust things and salvaging 2 courts. And, does that save any money if you're not removing 2 courts? You're not demoing that after that save money. Well, for glycol, then.
Thank you for the creative thinking. I'm very happy to hear Doug weigh in. That was going to be my first question about the glyco was, okay, what's the impact on the staffing and the workload every year? But that's
Yeah, the shift is because it's in the plans. It's actually a major kind of renovation for the HVAC at the high school. And so part of that made sense that why don't we wait on the glycol until that whole system changes over, because the system we have right now in place is relatively new, and then shifting it from the water system to the glycol system may also require some other mechanical changes. There's no way can't really say yes, we'll definitely have to replace this or not. And so that uncertainty made Doug kind of uncomfortable, and they found a way to maintain it. It's not ideal because the system isn't as responsive. Right? So, but he's able to do it. His crew has they know how to do it. We had somebody do it for us the first year to kind of show us to it, and then now they're able to maintain it. It doesn't seem to be too much of a work.
so the long-term plan is to update when the equipment starts to go and it's time to replace it anyway. Dan likes that one, right? Like not the stuff we just touched a few years ago.
And any equipment replaced as part of this project or even smaller zones or places would be planned for the glycol to be included now. So we already start the process of the changeover in any areas that we can with the family and consumer sciences group or the library here. Like as we're touching areas and impacting the mechanical systems, we get them up to those latest technologies to just sort of start chipping away at the maintenance burden as we go in preparation for a larger project.
There's no guarantee that if we changed over to glycol that it would even work. Because glycol apparently, according to Doug, is less effective with air conditioning than it is with heating. And so the systems that we have were designed for water, not designed for glycol. So we could go back to the manufacturer and say, oh, gee, you changed over to glycol and now it's not as cool in our buildings. So there's a plan down the road to replace the whole heating system and air conditioning. At that point, that becomes, and then as these other pieces of equipment age out, we get things that's designed to work with glycol.
Brian, did you say that the Brian Lombardo and whomever else in the athletic department, they have looked at this and they're okay with this whole plan?
Yeah, he was there at the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian and Tim looked it over. We went through it together. I met with Brian first just to go over the concept. He said, this makes sense. And one of the biggest factors we face right now is the use of data. It's overworked. And so this, like, as a phase in, makes a lot of sense. And then they brought up the idea of Bill Brian Lombardo brought up the idea of expanding it so that soccer could, so there's the fluidity too. With the football's playing here, that's the best they can play. Soccer here, they have forward soccer, girls boys soccer playing at the same time. So there's just a lot of opportunities for field hockey and then across the spring, all that.
They love that. They love the idea of having that flexibility, and they also love the idea of having, even though they're the old ones.
It's great when we're focused on tennis courts because they're in such bad shape that I haven't come up with an idea that's really gonna benefit all the kids who are on the field. That's fantastic. That's the goal. I'm so appreciative of the long-term planning and the flexibility too, to think about what we might need later. Do we need a massive turf field? We'll see what the usage is when we get there, but we're already thinking about it. That's great. We're gonna be set up well with all the plans. Like an amazing Lego kit.
Where does that funding come for the interim? Like, while that's being done, where are the kids playing? Or how do you make, like, that's being done, but how do you maintain the other fields? You know, like, where does that come from? Is that factored into this, or is that something?
You said the funding, or are you talking about the scheduling,
It's
or?
more than.
Where's where is that money? Like, where's the money for the maintaining the fields, and like where would field hockey play while we were doing this? And will there be diamonds dirt put on any of the diamonds next season? Or, you know, like, where is that? Like, is that part of this? Like,
It will be part of it. The construction management firm would work with the district, make sure they're not taking things out that you can't, you know, what can we get done over
like
the
at certain
summer?
times? And-
Yes,
okay.
yes. So they will coordinate all that when we get to the construction side of it. The funding side of it, Rick could answer is that you could do bonding.
Sorry.
Well, the first dollars to be spent for preliminary costs would be from the district capital reserve, and 1.6 million. So those are your first dollars spent. And then in theory, once SCP approves the plans and specs that are sent in by the architect, that's when you're permitted under state law to what's called a bond anticipation note, which is a 1 year note through construction until the point where they're converted to long-term bonds. So you can't borrow until SCP approves it, but you can use reserve dollars to kind of get Jerry Hinsky paid, the construction manager paid, while they're designing the project.
And
You
then
don't
the
have to pay
schedule.
for it.
You always said.
Right. Just
I'd
all
say
the
it
jobs.
if you-
So I think to maybe merge it, if I think I was understanding the sub part of the question. So during construction, obviously, if the field is down for a period of time, there's probably some district expense and effort in
Right.
busing the kids to another location or
That's-
having away games instead of home games. That is definitely part of the construction manager's purview, but what the target would be is working with the district to determine where we can break ground as early as possible. So site work is always contingent on weather. You know, if how wet the ground is, you don't want to be digging in a swamp because you're going to make yourself even get your truck stuck and they're going to be halted from work anyway. So how early can we break ground, but where we break ground first? You know, is it okay to phase the work so that the old tennis courts aren't removed until the new courts are in? Does that help? Is that worth it from a scheduling standpoint? Or is it more beneficial to remove the old courts first and roll the dice with something being done by September 1st or October 1st? So they would lay out a plan based off of a final referendum scope. They look at it, we would go through the process of what can feasibly be done and reasonably be done in a time period in a 3-month window, right? Or 6-month window without impacting sports, you know, without there's gonna be some impact. Trying to minimize the impact is the goal of what the construction management would try to work with.
When we installed the football field, we had to play our games with the goal of coming back to play at least one home game. I don't think we did that. I think we ended up going over and they had to play all the games away. But that's what happens. And so that will happen as this unfolds. You know, so they'll try to be strategic about how they make those moves so it has the least impact on the season. But yeah, it's definitely going to impact something. Yeah, it always does. It's just like same thing within the building. They'll try to start construction like in May.
This space would be a good example of that. You know, like how long can the district be without the library here? You know, when can work start? Are there
Temporary location.
temporary locations? Same thing with the family and consumer sciences room. You know, can that room be taken over on June 1st? You know, or what's happening after that from a program standpoint? What needs to happen for the students? The last thing we want to do is be in a spot where we're impacting day-to-day student operation in classes. But if the main program for something is done already and they're taking exams, then the exams in a different room, every day, every week helps the contractors and the construction managers get a job done over a very short summer time period.
Like the working on gym space, they'd be working on gym space at the high school, because they'll be outside, so in the spring, we keep them outside, they'll rearrange their units so that they keep them outside, it's raining, then they have to pump some other outside. So.
Oh, you had a question.
Also, when I worked at Iroquois, we were doing a major capital and it had to do with the tennis courts. Iroquois actually contracted with East Aurora to use East Aurora's courts. So there's different options available. Okay, yeah, in the traffic. Right.
It's nice that everyone does capital projects, so the coaches and athletic directors all work on their shared space. And then you can get the kids involved. Like, think about when we did Parkdale and all the little kindergartners moved halfway through the year, right? It's all exciting for them. Probably not so much fun for the teachers, but for the, you can get the kids on board with all kinds of inconveniences.
The 22.3 million, so that has built into it the volatility in the bidding market. If the bids come in very favorable, then it's that money that we would use for the alternate. Did I understand that?
Yes.
Thank you.
And are we still planning on looking at the drainage and the water
Yes.
issue? That was still,
Yeah, the work to get a contractor on site to scope and find everything underneath the ground is already in progress. It's just gonna take a period of weeks to get numbers in and costs and vet out the right contractor. And then at some point here, hopefully soon, you'll see something probably come across the Board of Education's tables for approval for a contract. I don't want to put a time frame on it, but I don't know how quickly they're gonna get back to us on prices, but that's still in progress.
Probably all the board members came prepared to discuss the three options and, you know, are we going to 1% or 1.3? Did anyone have questions or have anything discussion worthy? We've just been given a very tidy, prepared version. Any concern?
I have no concern, but I think we all need to understand what that tidy package is, you know, and that it is, that tax impact will be less than 1%. And that the dollar figure that we're gonna ask people to approve is the 22.3 million. So that's what we would be voting on in August, would be the dollar figure and you'd be able to explain to people what the tax impact of that is, and we would be able to list the scope, which includes all the things we talked about tonight, and the caveat that should be submitted in a favorable manner, that we have this list of alternates that are possible. So I think it's a neat little package, and if we all understand it, we're all prepared to vote on it in August, then we should say so tonight, so that there's no uncertainty in Mr. Russ's mind about what we're going to do in August.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Dan, that we have to be ready to talk to it. The one thing that keeps going around my mind is the last capital project, and that second proposition attached to that was the turf field, and I believe passed by 4 votes, 6 votes, well, whatever it was it was a handful of votes. And if I hear anything around the community, it's about the turf field and you know, how unnecessary it is. Now, I disagree with that, and I think that we understand the need for it and the advantages of having it, as opposed to putting the money into repairing the grass fields, continuing to maintain those. But I think that, to your point, Dan, we have to all be ready to address those sorts of questions as they come up, because I would hate to see this go down because people weren't well enough informed on the need and the reason to be.
For August, do we have some excuse me, some, talking points perhaps for board members in the community on use of field. Well, we've seen, it's interesting, we're not the speediest in East Aurora. We tend to be conservative and we don't jump on the newest thing. We let other people do it first, right? But now that we've got that turf field, it's highly used. It's in demand. It's not, it's not big and scary and nobody's eating little rubber pellets, right? And now we realize that there's so much, we can do so much more, right? We all know that now we can have more kids on fields more often, if we expand the whole complex. But could we have some tidbits we can work with?
I think one of the things you need to think about regarding that, those talking points, are the fact that over and over and over again, we have attempted to make those dirt fields work. We've done drainage system after drainage system after drainage system, and none of them have worked. And so to try to keep a soccer field going, it's just throwing money away, in my view, if you're gonna make it in grass. So my feeling is that it's the turf field is the economic, because you do it and it's done. And, and I know they'll come back and say, well, there's a lifespan. Well, so do I. It's the right.
It's both things, right? It's the economics of it, but it's also the advantages for the kids. And that's exactly what our job is, right? Is to make sure we're spending the money wisely and providing the opportunities for the children. And that's exactly what this is.
Well, you imagine spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a drainage system under grass. And then the kids are out there sinking up to their ankles.
Right, and practice is canceled
April.
again, and you can't use the field
You know?
because it's too stressed. You gotta give it a time to rest and all
That's what,
No,
no.
no, I fully agree with Joe's point. Yeah, I think the other point is the library too. I think having renderings, I can personally
We will
picture.
work on those things to get you some images that will allow you to be able to, first of all, inform the public, but also have put on display and stuff. So
I
that
think if you
is-
see what the library could look like, I think that visual piece is better than I can.
that. And I think to see what other districts are using for their media centers. I think that's what we need to educate the public on, what this space should be for the kids. How, this again is that thing where we're a little bit behind, right? Other folks, their kids have more opportunities because they have media centers, not just a room with books and tables.
And Steve talked at the meeting too about the security piece of this project.
Of all the talking points, there's some very great programmatic elements, right? The family and consumer science, the library. Every building is getting security upgrades, whether those are PA systems and clocks. I mean, the PA systems for making emergency announcements, or just making announcements when students can hear them, as well as fire alarm system upgrades that are, much needed and incredibly valuable from a life safety standpoint and security. So, there's a large component of the project that is hitting all three buildings directly targeted towards security and towards life safety. Fields are great, but we're all here first up and foremost for safety, and then education, and the rest is gravy.
Could you send us a copy of this?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm much more comfortable with what's been presented tonight, just the way it's laid out, and the different things that we talked about with the field and stuff. And I do think we need to have those different images of the media room so that people really do understand what this is, and they understand that we have been careful with the money and that we're not in terrible condition, but these are things that we need to do long term, not necessarily in fields, that the types of things that we want to explain and sell in terms of getting the community to support this project. But that they understand that we are trying to be proactive to protect what we do have, our buildings and our facilities, and that's the type of thing that we do, trying to do. And then the one question I have just sort of generally, which came up when we did the last turf field, is kind of those questions of maintenance and how that all figures in, because that is one of the discussions we had, because we have the issues with the maintenance, and we have to maintain turf field, we have to put down the pellets and that kind of stuff. What kind of cost are we looking at in terms of getting, the soccer? So, that would be something that I'd like to
Did you ever buy that, machine that was necessary for,
No, I think he has it serviced every so often.
Oh, so it's contractor.
Yeah, it's a contract recommended service, so that's pretty good.
So that's probably what we would do
On
obviously
this
with
one,
this
yeah,
other.
yeah, we just kind of buy what they recommend.
And just, Joe and I are on the athletic advisory committee, so we know about these discussions that we're talking about wellness drainage and all the different issues that they are just confronting, whether it's fall or spring, in terms of, trying to get the kids out there and have them be able to participate. So
Yeah,
thank you very much.
and the one thing that I thought of after you left, was one thing that came up at the athletic advisory committee meeting was storage is at a premium, and anything we can do to incorporate into any of these, if the dugouts can have locked storage or we can do anything like that as part of this, it'll free up some of the valuable, space that's desperately needed by others. And that's, I think, a conversation, with Brian and Bill and whomever else, but I think it was the booster clubs who were concerned about, being able to just leave stuff in spaces. So that was just
Storage is always gonna be an issue because the state will not give you any aid on it for that. So it's all local share and they don't like finding buildings nowadays. They're a little excitable about, all of a sudden we've had districts that just kind of put up a pole barn in the middle of. They're actually going to aerial photographs and finding it and asking what it is. Yeah, they can't do the reviews, but they can.
It's not quite fair anymore.
Well, I would suggest that in recent years, we have built 2 very large vacant storage buildings on that site. Huge buildings, 2 of them. And I think that what we need to do is hire someone who is an organizer to come in and plan for storage in those buildings. Go in the buildings and look at, stuff is strewn all over the floor. That's not how you store things. There should be shelving, there should be cubbies, it should be an organized, like you would have in a walk-in closet. It should be organized so that you can find the stuff and so that you're not tripping over it as you're walking through the door. So I think there's plenty of room for storage at those 2 buildings. Yeah, because it's properly designed.
It's always a good issue, because there's no basement, so, it's tight.
Even buildings in districts that have basements, all the buildings have storage.
Everybody, so there's never enough room for all of the stuff. You need to have
I would bet most of our houses have storage.
Yes. And have a big garage sale and clean it up and start. Other question?
On the middle school, on this draft document, the West Gym was on there. Is that part of this?
Yes, so the scope for the West Gym is limited to facelifting space. So there were some very preliminary discussions about more involved renovations involving the locker room or the fitness center or the platform in the gym. And the final resolution of what's included is additional supplemental lighting in the space, wall pads, sound systems, scoreboards, and mat boards.
I had a conversation last night, and also tied into conversations at the athletic advisory committee. Is there talk of being able to put up volleyball nets?
That can be something that we can look into here as well. I don't know if that was directly in there at this point, but it's something we can take a look at.
Because my understanding is that we're at a point now where we started our modified program with Holland, yet I believe there's only 1 or 2 Holland. They're down to 1 or 2 students as a part of it, and so there's a strong likelihood that it may be ours at some point in time. And what's missing in that gym, preventing us from having 3 teams practicing, is really just those
Standards, the whole
yeah.
It's just adjusting the floor and putting in the oversight.
Right, whatever those are, but I know that was something that was I don't know, that I think Brian, I would assume is well aware of being the volleyball.
There's a significant
Yeah.
amount of money in there for the things that we just talked about, lighting,
Right.
the pads and the scoreboard, so I don't see any reason why it couldn't also do all of that.
Yeah, it's not like what we did at the high school, we did the gym space, the gym floor, it was totally stripped and redesigned. So all of those things were then embedded, and so that it has maximum flexibility for exactly that joke. This would, man, I don't know, it'll be as easy.
It wouldn't
just
be, it
because
wouldn't
of
be
the
that
space.
level, but I think that, and
Do some,
we could yourself that, to accommodate some volleyball post seats.
And I, like I said, I assume Brian would bring it up at some point in time, but I just thought I'd mention it because I had a conversation last night.
Thank you. Other random bits of conversation? Yes?
Is there a way to, calculate, it probably is, that's what you do, but how much more, like, we added 100,000 to the capital reserve from the number you're working with now. What percentage on a levy would that be down? Be a 10% or would it be less
Well,
than
depending
that?
on where you add additional scope, right? So,
No, he's just talking about adding additional reserve.
Oh, reserve.
Yeah, and
Hold
scope.
on a second. Yeah, just add to the reserves and try to,
with the same 22.3.
exactly,
Okay, yeah.
try to get
Yeah, we could run
definitely
that.
under 1%.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out, is there a way to do that?
Yeah.
Like 100,000 added to it, what that would do to the. So would you do that maybe with 100 or 150 or two like that?
That would be helpful because in, October, we do have to transfer some funds.
Right now it's a little over 1.6 million. So yeah, we could run $100,000 to do.
See what that would look like.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's 160.
But the other thing too to point out, being conservative at the, 1% that we're at now, that doesn't assume any growth in the assessed value. So if that assessed value grows over time, that 1%.
It
Becomes-
changes, it becomes smaller.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
because of the growth in the
So we didn't
assessed
assume
value.
any, we think obviously most districts grow over time. In this model, we assume that the assessment value that you have now is the same
As
when this
last year.
project comes on board. So
Yeah,
if it does grow, which
Okay.
you can't make an assumption now where it's gonna grow to, it'll naturally take that below 1%, but this is like, as of now with today's assessment, it's right around 1%.
I understand what you're saying and how that works. That starts to get a little complicated.
Yeah, I just,
Selling
we
the project.
hesitate to say, all right, we're gonna have a 5% growth in assessed value, and then something happens in the economy and it doesn't, so we can't guess that.
Just
But it'll
stick
actually be-
stick in the sand somewhere.
We think it's gonna grow, but we no indication of how much it's gonna grow by.
You also want to have a conservative position.
Yeah.
So that you're not having to defend, whatever.
But it does allow you to be confident in saying less than 1%.
Yes.
That's the only problem.
So that factor, someone says, well, it's gonna be more than 1%. Well, there's the answer. The answer is it's a growth factor, and that's gonna reduce it. So we're planning on 1%, but we know it's gonna be less than 50%.
And then maybe the $100,000 or $200,000 increase in reserves takes you right around in that level where it's slightly below. So we'll run that,
Just wondering what it's like.
I would go out with 1%. I know
Yeah.
it's always painful when we try to tell people, but really it came back less because nobody
Yeah.
cares later.
Well, that's good.
But if, but if,
Two or
but if
three
it
years
comes
later.
back at 0.99%, they're gonna remember that you said it was less than 1 and it was only.
Yeah,
Well,
and
that's a good.
even our discussion tonight, I feel like we've been going back and forth, like I was sort of like, wait, are we saying it's 1% or are we saying it's less than 1%? So
We know
Yeah,
more
yeah.
than 1%.
no more, right,
More
but,
than
but at this table, that's what I'm
Yeah.
sitting here going, which is it? So I think we need to be very clear on what it is that we're.
That's right.
You're right.
So let's,
Because I just was like, as I'm sitting here, I was trying to understand what we were saying.
so let's
I
vote
would
on
say, I would say
1%.
no more than 1%.
Okay.
A maximum of 1%.
And what did we say that was last week? 42?
It's around, yeah, from that, right,
$48,000.
$48, somewhere in that.
$100,000.
That's-
40. Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
I just want to thank you, Steve, and Jerry, Rick, for all of your responsiveness. So we've been changing this right literally up to the wire. And so I really appreciate you. He was here yesterday. We changed over a bunch of things and they had to work there at the university to make this happen. So I appreciate all of the work and, please, and I think it's, I'm sorry.
I-
Oh, yeah.
But I did talk to Steve this morning. I said, hey, you're missing a couple of slides here.
Yeah, it's valuable.
Thank you for all the input.
Yeah.
The input is always invaluable at this point, because there's no other, if we don't plan the project right up front, then we're kicking ourselves later collectively at why didn't we add, why didn't we talk about this, so.
Yeah, and by going through it, I think what you can see too, it really is responsive to our students' needs, right? The design of this is really around, their interests, programming, their interests out of the classroom. So it takes care of all of those things, the safety and security, some general maintenance. So it's all of those things that the project is addressing, which ultimately impacts the kids in a positive way. So, you know, part of the reason that we look for this term, and you're exactly right, we're behind. You're almost, look at every school district in Erie County and in Western New York, many school districts are far ahead of us in terms of turf and those types of facilities, way ahead of us. Even the library media center, you wouldn't find it at the library. It's very much. Maybe some elementary schools, but definitely over high school. They've been modernized, right, to reflect current learning models, right, preparing kids to apply from here to high school.
We're still gonna have books.
Oh, yeah,
No.
yeah.
Okay, I just wanna make sure.
No, there'll be more.
Okay.
Easier access to information, let's just say that. So, yeah, that's what it is, and I think it's good, a long range plan, the adjustments we made, I think are right where we need to be. And then the next step will come in terms of a 5-year plan and the other needs that arise over the next, you know, like 5, 7 years, 8 years.
So great to have the plan.
Yeah.
Like just the future planning aspect is very exciting.
It's part of the building conditions. It really
Yeah,
is
right.
part, one of the things that people do appreciate with that building conditions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think will be incredibly helpful to have these points.
Yeah.
Well, so is everyone prepared to vote in August? Right, and then we have a couple of months to talk it up, right?
Yes.
We'll work on those points and probably get them to you a few days before, so that at that meeting, if you have questions or other things you'd like us to add, we can discuss them. I don't be there, obviously, but probably share this all over again in some capacity. And, yeah, there's anything that comes up.
Well, that's what we do with the budget over and over and over.
We're gonna have a public forum, right, Brian?
That's it.
We're gonna have a public forum.
Yeah, we'll do some planning with the communications committee and get the word out, and we'll have opportunities when it gets a little closer, when we have some, additional renderings and those types of things. We'll get up. Have any, probably sometime maybe in the fall, October, November, November. Those would be
Yeah. Jerry, when we normally, the public forums are usually in that November-ish range, about a month-ish before.
About a month before.
We'll have it
Before we get
available on the website.
Yeah,
all
sure.
information and
It's
stuff,
nice
so
to
that
put up
people
really
can
easily.
have it.
Well, let's
Send
put
it out
it-
its blast, send it out, it's just you can even send it out in the general communications in the entire.
Right.
But, sorry.
All right, sorry, we should have an agenda item either in August towards the end of the meeting or in September where we can brainstorm ways of reaching you. Because we all have contacts of some kind or another, and suggestions for groups that we can go out and speak to, or publications that we can use, whatever, to make our job as board members, once we approve this scope, and our amount for August, will be to communicate all these things that we now understand pretty well, but that we have to help with.
So we're gonna have this as an agenda item from this point on.
Yeah. Could be on the agenda for forever.
You get to come to every meeting
Yeah.
until December.
And Jerry, let me just say, it's
No
less than,
pressure, but there's 5 minutes saved. I think we should have a goal of keeping it under an hour.
Okay, great, great,
Jerry,
great.
it's less than an hour right now. It's
I
not
know,
2
that's what I
hours.
was thinking. We
So-
want
We're
that
fine.
goal.
Nothing else on the
Not just
agenda.
11 o'clock at night stuff. 7 o'clock.
Michael Reasonable, thank you very
Oh,
much.
Rick, it's, how do you know stuff then? The approach we're taking. We're gonna kill me. maximum 1%, we'll say that.
Well, I'll send it to him. Big end. When you think about our point, because they're the audit's been done, you get a sense of how much it generates.
Okay, yeah.
You ready for a motion?
Is there any other information to come for the board before we, okay, may I have a motion to enter executive session to discuss matters related to pending litigation? Moved by Mr. Flowers, seconded by Mr. Cassidy. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Carried 7-0.
And we will
After exec-
return
we-
for the
I-
purpose of adjournment.
We will return for the sole purpose of adjourning the meeting. The board will conduct no further business this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.